All right, mod 14.1, angles formed by intersecting lines. For a lot of you, this should be review and should be fairly straightforward. So let's jump into it. So our essential question we're going to be looking at here is, how can you find the measure of angles formed by intersecting lines? All right, so what I want you to do is work on finding the measure of angle 1, 2, 3, 4, measure angle 1 plus 2, and so on down that road. You have a protractor, and go ahead and draw some figure that fits these scissors. And so intersecting lines that look like that. Label them however you want. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can go 1, 2, 3, 4. None of that matters how you label them. Just draw your two intersecting lines, label them, and then figure out your measures. All right, so a couple definitions here. We have vertical angles are a pair of non-adjacent angles formed by intersection of two lines. So these would be vertical angles. We'd also say that those are vertical angles. So when two lines intersect, you get two sets of vertical angles. Then we get linear pair. And so a linear pair are two angles are said to be linear if they are adjacent angles formed by two intersecting lines. So these are adjacent. Adjacent is next to each other. All right, so reflect. I want you to name a pair of vertical angles and a linear pair of angles in your diagram. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I want you to make a conjecture about the measures of a pair of vertical angles, and then make a conjecture about the measures of a linear pair. So we'll discuss these questions when we come back into class. As group work, so this is not in your notes, this is something we will do in class, but just giving you an idea of what is going to happen with one of the things we do in class. All right, so proving the vertical angles theorem. So the vertical angles theorem states if two angles are vertical angles, then the angles are congruent. So in our diagram over here, state that 1 and 3 are congruent and 4 and 2 are congruent, meaning they just have the same angle measure. So our given is 1 and 3 are vertical angles, and we want to prove that 1 and 3 are congruent. So we are then, most of this is filled out, we're just going to fill in a couple things. So 1 and 3 are vertical angles, that is given up here. 1 and 2 are a linear pair, that is given by the diagram. Then 2 and angle 3 are a linear pair, also given by the diagram there. 1 and 2 are supplementary. And it's the linear pair theorem, stating that two angles that are linear pairs are also supplementary. So angle 2 and 3 are supplementary, and that, again, same reason as the one above, that is linear pair theorem. And then measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 equals 180 degrees. That's the definition of supplementary angles. Two angles that are supplementary equal 180. And we also know that the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3 equals 180 by the definition of supplementary angles. Measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 equals measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 3. And so those can be set to each other by what is called the transitive property of equality. And we know then that measure of angle 1 equals measure of angle 3. If we're just solving, we would subtract measure of angle 2 And so that is subtraction property of equality. And then last, that gives us angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. By the definition of congruence, two angles that are congruent are also equal to each other. So there is the proof of the vertical angles theorem of 1 and 3 being congruent. All right, your goal now is given angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles. So I'll help you get started here. Angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles. And our reason is given. And what we want to prove is that angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And then I'll let you fill in the rest, and we'll discuss this when you come into class. All right, so using vertical angles, we want to solve here a little bit. So cross braces help keep the deck post straight. Find the measure of each angle. So here's what we know. We have 146, and we just got done proving that vertical angles are congruent. So 6 is congruent to that 146, so then the measure of angle 6 is 146. And then we know that 6 and 7 are a linear pair. So 180 minus 146. That gives us 34. So measure of angle 7 is 34 degrees. Now you could go linear pair the other way, but we also know that 5 and 7 are vertical angles, so then you get 34 degrees there. All right, so here we're going to use supplementary and complementary angles. Remember, supplementary angles add up to 180, and complementary angles add up to 90. So go ahead and work on this one, and we will discuss this one as well when you come into class. All right, so elaborate. I want you to draw two intersecting lines, label points on the line, and tell what angles you know are congruent and which are supplementary. So two intersecting lines, something like that. And instead of labeling points, we'll just label it 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I want you to tell me which ones are congruent and which ones are supplementary. Again, we'll discuss that one, so be ready to respond to that question in class. And then our essential question here that we will discuss is, how can you find the measure of angles formed by intersecting lines? So be prepared to respond to this question. Have some written answer down. Make it easy to respond when we discuss this. And last, your assignment is page 683, numbers 1 through 4, 6 through 12, 15, 18, and 19. All of this will be posted on Google Classroom as well.